Now, however, there's a problem when there's a confounding variable, which is if you always run the no teasing condition in the morning and the teasing condition in the evening. Now, when you find differences between these two conditions, how confident are you in saying that it's really the teasing that caused the difference? That if in this condition, the teasing, the female participant does like the actor more, are you confident that it's because of the teasing? No, no, no. There's a confounding variable of either in the morning or at night. It could be that's the evening thing that's making the difference, right? And we'll never know because they're confounded. Again, the word confound means to confuse, and that's basically what the confounding variable does. It confuses results, so you don't know what exactly is causing the changes. Is it the IV that you manipulate, the teasing or no teasing, or is it the confounding variable, the time of day? We'll never know because it's a poorly run study. And that's the idea of how it threatens the internal validity. There's a lot of ways that confounding variables can sneak into your study. I'm going to talk about some of the reasons that people act differently in the laboratory than they do in real life. First off is experimenter bias. In a study where the experimenter, like me, knows the outcome of the theory that we're trying to predict, research, it's possible that the experimenter does something inadvertently to cause the outcome that they want. I'll give you a quick example. Suppose this is a study about how selfish someone is. And one of the DVs is like, if I give you an envelope with some money in it, would you take it quickly or slowly? Right? The idea is that if you reach for it much quicker, then you're going to be seen as more selfish. Now, the experimenter might know the results. So going in, I might actually give you the envelope faster in one condition. Right? I'd say, oh, here it is. I'm expecting you to take it faster, so I give it to you faster. Or slower, like, oh, I'm thinking you won't take it, so I'm just going to hand it to you slower. I'm going to hold on to it tighter. And so you can see that the participant's reaction is really kind of a reflection of the experimenter who knows the outcome. So by acting in that way, they might elicit that kind of response. If you go on, for example, the teasing study that we were doing, it might be that the actor knows that if he teases you, you'll like them more, so he'll actually appear even more charming, right? That's a bias, that he'll appear more charming or look at you with more eye contact and elicit that behavior back. On the other side is the participant bias, that the participant coming in might be expecting somehow that the study would turn out, and they might figure out the premise of your study, and so during the experiment, they might act in a way that would help you out. That is, they figure out the premise of the study and change their own behaviors to match that of the outcome of their prediction. So if, for example, in the heat and aggression study, you put them in a hot room and you ask them to do something violent. So the participant thinks, well, maybe this has something to do with the heat. Oh, you know what? Maybe they want me to act more aggressively because it's hot in here. And so when they do it, they act actually more aggressively. And so in that case, the participant figures out the study and tries to act in a way that helps you out, or even maybe tries to mess you up, right? It's like, oh, this is what you want me to do. I'm going to do the opposite just to see how you like it. So that's another problem in designing studies. There's another idea of a demand characteristic, and this is basically a feature of the experiment, that you design the study somehow that has to elicit a certain outcome in your study. I'll give you a quick example. Maybe you ask someone how much they'll donate to, say, a Haiti charity fund. There's a big earthquake in Haiti, so you ask them in the study how charitable they feel. And so you design the study such that it's impossible to say no to donating it. For example, you might say, oh, how much money hypothetically would you give to a Haitian charity? And people have a lot of pressure to say, well, I'll give a lot of money, of course, because this is, first of all, not real money. I can give you as much as I want. So there's something built into the study that demands the participant react in a certain way. For example, if you're interested in seeing how helpful someone is, whether they're going to help you in a certain situation, you might create a situation that's so life-threatening they have no choice but to help you. Like if you trip a little bit, okay, they might help you or not. Or if you drop some papers, okay, there's a 50% chance that they might help you. But if you're walking somewhere and like a bookshelf falls on you and the participant is watching you, that situation is so extreme that you have to help that person, right? So you design a study where basically everyone has to act a certain way. That's a demand characteristic. Finally, another issue to consider is that of social desirability. That is to say, each participant wants to present themselves in a certain way that makes them desirable. There's certain traits that are desirable. And so it makes measuring certain things very difficult. Suppose I'm interested in people's attitudes towards African Americans. right? Basically, it's how racist are you? And so people know exactly what to say when that question is proposed to them. They know to say, oh, I'm not racist at all. Black people are totally fine, right? They know the desirable answer. Because if they say, oh, I'm pretty racist, or, I hate 50% of black people, that's like, oh, totally not cool, man, right? That's an awful response. So they know to kind of tailor and control their responses to increase the social desirability. And so one way to kind of mask social desirability is to ask things in ways that the participant don't know that they're being measured. So there's kind of secret, kind of covert ways to measure someone's liking of a different race. For example, how close I sit to another person if they're black. That's one measure of liking. Another way to do it is the double-blind procedure. That is to say, the participant doesn't know what condition they're in, nor does the experimenter. Right? So if the experimenter doesn't know what condition they are, it can't have any experimenter bias. And this is a very common kind of research procedure, the double-blind, as we call it. That is, the participant doesn't know what condition they're in, and the experimenter who's treating them doesn't know. So if I'm bringing you the pill to eat, I don't know whether that's a placebo or if that's the experimental drug. Okay, and there's three more things to talk about, and it's the idea basically that when someone's in a lab, they're going to act differently than they would be in real life. Right? Because the laboratory is an inherently unnatural situation. It's very controlled. It's not like what they'll do in real life at all. So to make sure that, first of all, in the experimental and the control group we talked about, that the experimental group is only different thing from that in the control group is the independent variable. What they're manipulating is different. And secondly, we want to make sure the control group has a baseline, what we call a placebo effect. And for those who don't know what placebo is, a placebo basically is a little pill. It looks like a real pill, except it's filled with sugar. Does absolutely nothing to you. You can eat as much as you want, you won't get sick. However, when you go into a drug study, for example, that you say, oh, this is going to treat headaches, and this pill might treat headaches, some people get a placebo pill because you want to know that maybe just thinking that you're in a study would change your outcome. And they really found it. In some of the studies, they found that 33% of placebos actually work. You come in and you're thinking you're in a dieting study. This pill will help you lose weight. And so you take the placebo, thinking it's an experimental drug, and then you feel like it's working, right? It might be that when you walk to work, you might walk faster, or you might exercise more, thinking that since you're in a study, that you might as well exercise more too. So just having a placebo effect could really mess up your studies if you don't have that control group. Another idea is the Hawthorne effect. It's very similar. Basically, the story is very interesting. There was a factory that was interested in ways that could increase worker productivity. And so they cut off some workers, put them in a special room, and they studied them. And they were able to manipulate these little things, like if it were brighter, if the lights were dimmer, if you gave them more rest breaks, if you gave them less rest breaks, more food, less food, ventilation, no ventilation. And what they found, surprisingly, was that anything you did to this group of people, they would actually work harder than if they weren't in the study, the baseline. And the idea is that since the participants know they're being looked at and watched, they acted very differently in the lab than they would do in real life. And that's basically the Hawthorne effect, that knowing that you're in an experiment, you actually change your behavior to that. Okay. And another confounding variable might be that of order effects. That was the idea that how you order things can have a dramatic effect on the outcome. I'll give you a quick example. There's a survey out there, and one of the questions is, how happy are you with your life? It's a life satisfaction question, 1 to 7. And they found that most of the time that item works fine, except when it's after an item called, how many dates have you had in the last year? And so when people answered the satisfaction question afterwards, they thought the two were related. So if they had very few dates, their life satisfaction would go down. They're less happy with their lives because they had fewer romantic dates in their recent time. And so just the order of questions, or maybe in conditions, can cause an effect. And one way to counter that is by counterbalancing. Basically, the idea of counterbalancing is that for some people it occurs in one pairing, the other one is like flipped. So 50% of the time they kind of change the order of it, and that kind of takes care of that. Another thing to look out for when you're doing survey is that of wording effects. How you word a certain question, how you frame it, has a big effect. I'll give you a quick example. On political psychology research, they're interested in people's ideas on welfare, whether you support welfare or not. And if they word it like aiding the poor versus if they word it like welfare, people have different kind of responses. they react much better to helping the poor than welfare, because they explain it that the word welfare is kind of tinged with race-based ideas, that people who receive welfare are overwhelmingly black, they think. And so their anti-black sentiment kind of works into there too.